management. And we are located at UC Davis, which if you're not super familiar, we're about 20 minutes away from Sacramento, our state capital. So many of you might be interested in graduate school, whether that be a master's program or a PhD program. So I wanted to talk about some things to consider about graduate school before you start to explore different programs, as well as some insight into our program and what we have to offer. Today, I'm just going to go through considering graduate programs, how to go about choosing one, the application process, and then dive into EPM at UC Davis, and then funding and employment, since funding tends to be a large concern for many graduate students. Also, feel free to interrupt me at any point or drop questions in the chat. So why consider graduate school? There's a few things to think about, and it requires a little bit of self-reflection. Do you need a graduate degree in a career that you're interested in? Are you potentially interested in consulting, air pollution analyst, anything STEM related or policy related, since you are mostly STEM students? Having a master's degree or PhD also opens a variety of opportunities in terms of career placement and finding jobs, and even higher salary. No one is going to deny a higher salary. So I encourage you to do some career exploration, like on LinkedIn, PayScale, Glassdoor, and just search a few potential careers that you might be interested in, and then see what the requirements are for those job positions. Do they just require a bachelor's degree? Do they require a master's? And whatnot. So sometimes they only say they require a bachelor's degree, but if you have a master's, it can supplement for a lack of experience per se. I found that pretty common in a lot of applications. And also, having a graduate degree can make you a more competitive candidate. It can set you apart from other applicants that might be interested in the position because you have the technical background and training. And one last thing to consider while thinking about graduate school is the workload. Grad school is very different than undergrad in that your instructors and professors expect you to show up prepared to your class. So that means completing any assignments or necessarily readings before class, so your class time is dedicated to lecture or active discussion participation. So because I mentioned a little bit of this, it's considering self-reflection, you want to make sure you have goals set up. And these goals can be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based goals. I have linked here Imagine PhD, which is just an online tool to help you set and track your goals. Even though it says it's for PhD, it's not necessarily. It could be for master's students, it could be for bachelor students. Doesn't even have to be degree related, but it's really fascinating because they have skill assessments and personality assessments, interest, and sometimes you can learn a lot about yourself that you might not consciously know. Like I've taken these values assessments and it's helped me learn a lot about myself and what I look for in a career. It's also a pretty neat tool because you can create an individual development plan. So you can set specific goals for yourself and you can monitor and track throughout your years. These can be short-term goals, like maybe, for example, 6 months from now, you want to make sure you are keeping your GPA up, passing all your classes. Maybe a year from now, you are looking for graduate schools, talking to faculty members, applying to grad school. And then 5 to 10 years from now, you are in the job field, looking for higher positions, etc. So if you don't already have some sort of career or professional development plan, I really encourage you to start one or begin thinking about it. And this tool is just a great resource to help you get started. Next, choosing a program. So say you decided, yes, I think graduate school would help me professionally. Consider what are some of your passions and motivations. Are you interested in policy, environmental science? Maybe it's something a little bit different. And consider researching potential graduate programs. Some can be in the state of California, like Southern California, Northern California, or possibly out of state internationally. It's kind of up to you. And consider what's important for you from a graduate program. Are you interested in research? Maybe a thesis-based graduate program might be better for you. Or are you more interested in just professional career development? A program like ours, EPM, might be a better fit because we are a professional development program. And fifth, making sure it fits your lifestyle. Like I mentioned, do you want to stay locally? Are you willing to relocate, for example, to Sacramento? It just depends on what your current lifestyle looks like. But in potential jobs, if you choose to get a job after graduation before applying to grad school, it depends. And lastly, one of my greatest pieces of advice for choosing a program is connecting to faculty, to current students, alumni, anyone working on campus, staff, coordinators at these programs, because they're the ones that are working directly with the students. They have the connections to all the classes, the internships, and everything there has to offer. So if you are at the end of this still interested in our program, I can share a list of our faculty members and students that you can feel free to connect with on a different level. So here are some general application materials. These would apply to any graduate program, also ours, but most of them will look similar for other programs as well. First is the application and transcripts. We don't require official transcripts, so if you just have your unofficial ones, you can submit those in the application. That's perfectly fine. Next is your resume. You want to make sure your resume is accurate and up to date with any professional internship work experience you might have, and making sure that highlights any environmental work or any policy work in general. I'm sure your school might have an internship or a career center. Oftentimes they do hold workshops about resumes, or they can probably meet with you one-on-one to get some individualized resume help. Third are letters of recommendation. So we require 3 letters of recommendation from either professionals and academics. That could be a faculty member, a mentor, an advisor, or can also be a supervisor outside of school. Let's say for a recent internship or job that you may have. Fourth is a personal statement. So we require 2, one of them is a statement of interest, as well as a personal history statement. We want to know who you are, what made you who you are, why you're interested in graduate school, and what you can bring to the table in our program. Next are GREs or other testing. So we at UC Davis, or at least for our program in particular, we don't require the GRE anymore. We used to, but found out it kind of created a barrier for a lot of students that were interested in applying to grad school. So I'm personally very happy that we no longer have the GRE requirement, but keep in mind that some other programs still do have this requirement. So I would look sooner rather than later in case you do have to take the GRE. You might be interested in taking a GRE prep course or taking that sooner and taking it multiple times. So I'd recommend looking sooner rather than later for those requirements, depending on each school. And then lastly, for most, if not all, graduate applications, there is an application fee. Yes, I have a question.
So I do have a question in regards to schools that are not requesting the GRE.
Mhm.
What does that mean in terms of being a competitive student? Does that mean they're looking more closely at the rest of my application as well?
Yeah, so we evaluate all applicants holistically. The idea behind removing the GRE test score is because sometimes it's not representative of who a student is. Me personally, I'm also a master's student, not in this program, but a different program. And it was very intimidating for me because I'm not a good test taker. Although like my experience and my grades and my GPA really show that I'm personally not a good test taker. So we do evaluate holistically. That's grade, professionalism, your letters of recommendation, what faculty have to say about you, and an experience you do have. So that's just my take on it. But a lot of schools are now transitioning to no longer requiring the GRE. I know some undergrad schools are also removing like the SAT, for example. So what is so special about UC Davis? First, we are ranked the greenest university in the US and actually 5th in the world. And this is in terms of campus sustainability. So everything on campus is either compostable, recyclable. There's huge programs that students can get involved in. And this is like in terms of all of our food facilities and any other connections. We're also ranked #1 in ag sciences and forestry, as well as 2nd in the world. So environmental policy management does fall into the ag sciences and forestry. We are in the College of Ag and Environmental Sciences. UC Davis is also #2 in the nation's top 5 public universities, which personally very impressive. And last, we're also in the top 15 in terms of career placement for students who are graduating from the university. This statistic especially stands out to us because we are a professional program. So we like to give our students skills and tangible experiences that they can use after graduation. So now I want to dive into our program and what we have to offer. So we are a professional master's program. Like I said, we don't have research built into our program, so there's not necessarily a thesis per se, but instead it's all professional experience. Usually students decide to complete our program in 2 years, although we do have an accelerated 12-month track. And students are required to take the same courses in both the options. There's just less flexibility in the accelerated track because, I mean, all your classes are lumped into 1 year. There are pros and cons to both. If you want to take more elective classes, I would recommend the 2-year track because, for example, in fall quarter of your 2nd year, it's entirely open for any elective opportunities. You can choose electives and use that towards a specialization. We have a variety of specializations that we have to offer, like climate change, environmental justice, water resource management. The list goes on and on. And for a graduation requirement, we have a comprehensive exam. It's not meant to sound scary. It's not an actual test that you're sitting down and taking. Instead, you can think of it like a portfolio. So there are 4 large components of portfolio that you work on throughout your degree. One of them being a professional development plan. The other 2 are part of a practicum, so an internship, and that would be a proposal and then a report. And then lastly is a policy clinic report, which is built into our program as part of a class. We do offer hands-on and experiential learning opportunities. A lot of this does come from our practicum, which is essentially our fancy word for internship. So students are working directly with external organizations in terms of some sort of environmental policy related project. And we like to be as flexible as possible. So students are allowed to do essentially whatever they want with whoever they want. And we've also partnered with other agencies like Department of Conservation, NRCS, Native Plant Society, and they hire a select number of students every year to work with them. Like I said, research is not a formal requirement, but some students who are interested can pursue this. And a lot of that just depends on your interests and the connections that you make with current faculty on campus. Our cohort size is usually about 30 to 40 students. That's our goal. This fall quarter, for example, we have 33 new students that have joined us. And I think this size is pretty manageable because it's not so large that your faculty don't know your name. We all know your name. All the staff know your name. You get to know each other on a nice level, I'd say. But it's also a decently large amount of students where we have people coming in from a diverse variety of different backgrounds and education. We have some students that are coming directly out of undergrad. Some students are mid-career professionals. They might have had a few jobs in between or are kind of doing a career change or a life change. So it's quite a mix of students with different backgrounds. So highlights about our program. If you aren't familiar with Davis, we are very close to Sacramento, the state capital, and this helps us tremendously in terms of networking. We have instructors that teach some of our core classes that are actually working for the state, different divisions within the state and the government. We also have different tied networks to the state capital. Like I mentioned, we have contracts with Department of Conservation and a variety of other different organizations. California also usually tends to be one of the first in terms of environmental policy. So if you're interested, being in Sacramento is definitely a highlight of our program. We do have a lot of networking, and that's between alumni and external partners. For example, one of our alumni that just graduated this past fall is now director of a program in CalRecycle of the EPA, which is very impressive. We also have external partners. So we refer to them as our external advisory committee. And essentially, they are working professionals in the field outside of UC Davis that have committed their time to networking and assisting our program. So right now, there's a mentorship program that we have with the external committee, and they take on a few students each year in terms of meeting with them to connect them to their network and potential jobs and internship opportunities. At UC Davis, we do have a variety of expert faculty teaching in different disciplines. We are an interdisciplinary program at Davis, meaning sometimes students in our classes are from different master's programs, like Institute of Energy or Transportation Studies or Civil Engineering, Environmental Engineering. Our faculty are also from many different departments across campus. We have faculty from plant sciences, environmental sciences. It's pretty diverse. So I think that's a good nature because it brings everyone together and you get a new sense from different opinions. Here are a few of our core courses that I want to highlight. First is Analysis, Environmental Management, and Policy. And this is essentially a science communication course. It's an introduction to who we are and what you're doing as environmental professionals. Next is Environmental Policy and Evaluation. And this course is mostly about economic theory and current market econ issues, and then some tools to solve that. Next is Environmental Governance, which often has a lot of real-world case studies. So you're really learning about current environmental policy issues in the state and the nation internationally. And then next is Environmental Law. This course is, It is environmental law, and one of the highlights of this course are mock negotiations. Students love mock negotiations, and it really brings everyone together. Last, Policy Development and Implementation. This is what I meant. This course is actually taught by an external lecturer that works for the state right now. And she instructs students about local federal policy and skills for writing for a political audience and how the legal process works for developing bills into legislation. These are just some of our few core courses. I mean, there are additional ones that aren't on here, as well as different elective opportunities and other classes you can take at Davis. For admissions, we do have a priority deadline of January 5th and a space available deadline by April 15th. So what this means is that if you apply by January 5th, you are automatically considered for funding. And this is internal funding and graduate studies funding. So every year, our program does offer a significant amount of funding fellowships to our students. The certain amount depends every year. It's a little bit variable, but one of the highest offers we do offer is full in-state tuition plus a stipend on top of that. The next level below that is just in-state tuition, and then just a stipend is the next level. The internal graduate studies fellowships are very substantial, often cover, again, all of your tuition and a stipend on top of that. Although they are a little they're a little bit more competitive because they're evaluating all applicants that are applying to UC Davis that year, and it's not necessarily just our program. And then, like I said, if you apply by January 5th, then you'd be eligible for both of these types of funding. For the April 15th deadline, that's a space available deadline, and it sounds like it is. If we still have space in our program, then we'll consider students for admission this time, but you are not eligible for funding, and we can't guarantee that we will actually review applications depending on how many we get and if we have enough students between the 30 to 40 range. Our materials are very similar to the ones I discussed earlier. Statement of purpose and personal history statement. We want to know who you are, what's made you who you are, why you attended school at San Bernardino, why you're interested in UC Davis, environmental science, and what you can do to contribute. Your transcripts, like I mentioned earlier, as well as 3 letters of recommendation. It's good to have a mix between professional and academic because we want to see you a whole-rounded student as an applicant. Then resume or CV, like I talked about earlier. And for international students, we do require English testing scores. Lastly, this one doesn't necessarily apply since I assume most of you or all of you are STEM majors, but if you're not, we do have a few prereqs for those who are non-STEM majors. So the timeline for admissions, we start reviewing applications immediately after January 5th. And we review all applicants holistically, like I mentioned, and we have our rubric outlined with further detail on our website if you're interested in seeing what exactly we're looking for. But some of the main things we look for are academic preparedness. So this is your GPA, the classes you've taken, as well as communication skills, and professionalism. How are you writing your statement of letters of interest? What do faculty or other supervisors have to say about you and your professionalism? We also want to see your professional work experience and internship experience. Again, reflected either in your statement of interest letters or in your resumes or both. And then lastly, your contributions to diversity and outreach. What are you actively doing to contribute to your community? And what's happened in your life that created you, that shaped you to be who you are. And then after our deadline, we start reviewing applications and make decisions in February. And after we've made our internal decisions, then it goes to graduate studies for a final review. And then hopefully by February and March, we will send out decision letters on if you were accepted or not. And following that, you would also get notified if you were offered funding or fellowship opportunities. And like I mentioned earlier, this process starts all over again in April for our space available deadline. Some frequently asked questions we get: do we require the GRE? No, we do not. Do you offer application fee waivers? Yes, actually this year is the first time graduate studies at Davis and even our program has offered waivers for application fees. So there is a supplemental application you can find on our website where you'd submit your regular application. And grad studies also offers waivers for those who have completed other preparatory programs. So that could be like the McNair Scholars or Fulbright. There's a long list of them, and all of that can be found on Graduate Studies website too. We ask for all of your supporting materials no later than January 10th. So supporting materials might be your letters of recommendation because those have to be submitted by your recommender directly. It doesn't go through you. So we do allow a little bit of leeway and extra time for that. And we would notify you about your admission letter, usually in February, if you apply by the January 5th deadline. Although if you apply later, then it's usually later May to June. Keep in mind that if you do have less than a 3.0 GPA, which is required by graduate studies, it might take a little bit more time. while a 3.0 is required, we do still review all applications and oftentimes do make waivers or exceptions for students who do not have a 3.0. But with that, we have to create a waiver on your behalf, and graduate studies has to review that. So sometimes the process for admission notification can get a little bit delayed. And then lastly, TOEFL or English scores for international students. Where might our alumni be now? Usually all over California, some of them NorCal, SoCal, out of state, internationally, just depends. Mostly local governments, federal governments, nonprofits, consulting, private agencies. They're really all over the board. These are just a few examples where some of our alumni work now. Department of Water Resources, Delta Stewardship Council, the EPA, PG&E, other private companies. So there's quite a variety of where our students choose to work after graduation. And I will say that oftentimes the internships that you gain as a student will lead to permanent positions afterwards. So a lot of it is networking. Networking is definitely a key in our program. Last is funding. Funding is a major concern because you can't go to grad school if you don't have the funds for it, unfortunately. So there are a few ways that students choose to fund their career or fund their degree. One of them is through program fellowships. Like I mentioned, this is automatically within the application. If you apply by January 5th, you will be considered for funding. And that's for program funding as well as graduate studies funding. There also are a large number of external fellowships that you can find. We do have a link for certain job platforms or other platforms that you can use to search for external fellowships, although there's a wide variety of them. They're all over. The application deadlines really vary, so I encourage you to do some personal research if you're interested in finding any external fellowships. The most popular way our students choose to fund their degree is through academic student campus employment. And that would be a teaching assistant or TA, which I'm sure you're probably familiar with as CSU students. But any TA position that works 25% or greater, which is 10 hours a week, like out of a 40-hour week, they get tuition and fees remission as well as a stipend. Graduate student researcher positions, which we call GSR positions. Again, if you work 25% or greater, you do get tuition fee remission, and you also get non-resident tuition. So that's out-of-state tuition. I'm not sure if any of you are out-of-state residents, but this is highly sought after if you are an out-of-state resident, although after 1 year in California, you can apply for residency, and then you would only be required to pay the in-state tuition. Lastly, our student loans, usually not favorable ones, but sometimes it's necessary. The process is the same. You apply through FAFSA, but I just wanted to note that Pell Grants are only offered to undergrad students, and that would not apply for master's students. One last thing is Envision UC Davis. This is a program set up by graduate studies at the university, and it's an opportunity for current California residents to come to campus, explore potential graduate programs, and learn about fellowships and other funding opportunities. There are some benefits of this. If you do participate in Envision program, you do receive a fee waiver as well as travel accommodations. It's a weekend long program in October. We actually just finished ours from this past year, where students come to campus, they get a campus tour, meet some guest lecturers, meet all of our faculty and our department, and see what we have to offer. Again, this is only for California residents. So if you're at all interested in exploring a master's program or a PhD program at UC Davis, not even necessarily ours, this program is really, really cool, and I encourage you to check it out. If you are interested, the application closes in May for next year. So that is all the presentation materials I have. Are there any questions that come up? Feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or put something in the chat.